it's this beautiful ecosystem, and the Mayans came up with that. Yeah, they were spiritual people. They saw all things as living. They saw spirit in all things. They were biophilic, which meant that they promoted and encouraged life. They never invented things to take life. Their weapons were from prehistoric times. So, they were life-giving, and yeah, they really cared about community, and they also saw the beauty of diversity in unity. I like to tell people, regardless of whether we know it or not, we're in communication with our ancestors. We are connected to our ancestors. It's up to us to make that choice. The ways in which we can, again, connect with the ancestors include
Christine Olivia Hernandez, welcome on Just Tap In, sister. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
I am excited about the release of this beautiful, magical book, Remember Your Roots, that is literally coming out tomorrow. And excited for that to touch hearts and to support people in coming back to connection with their roots and connection with all parts of themselves. So they can be more like the tree, is what I like to say. Like, we get to be more grounded, right? And rooted so that we can rise up.
Beautiful. And yeah, this is a special episode because I feel that, both of us come from ancestral lineages, me coming from a lineage in Colombia, you a mix of Mexico, Guatemala. And, from those Mayan cultures, you've been sharing so much wisdom throughout, your journey about these cultures, what they really were trying to tell us, even though we lost a lot of that knowledge throughout the years. And I think one of the greatest preserved secrets of the Mayans was the sacred Mayan calendar. And they don't see time as linear, as you mentioned in the book, but they see time as cyclical. And you said in your book that when you interrupt the cycles you are in, you give yourself a chance to change, a chance to release one identity for another that is more trusting, more magical, and more authentic to you. So I was wondering if we could go out and look at a bigger perspective of what's going on in the world right now. What cycle did humanity break when the supposed calendar was supposed to end and that the world was going to end in 2012? What cycle did humanity end, and what are we beginning now?
We're moving into a time where there's a new paradigm, right? Many of us call it the new earth. And it isn't necessarily a new earth, right? We do move in cycles, and it is a spiral. And so it is a coming back of, these ancient ways and an ancient future. But we're learning from the ancient ways so that we can come forward in a more beautiful way, right? So with the technology, with the teachings that we learn in this modern world, combined with that beautiful ancient wisdom and intelligence that is connected to nature, connected to the cosmos, knowing they're interconnected to all things, then we can move forward in a more beautiful, more expansive, more inclusive, more incredible way, right? Yeah.
And I know you've gone through a whole journey of really separating yourself from your roots, reconnecting back to your ancestral land, spending, almost the whole pandemic in Guatemala. And now recently you are being initiated as a Mayan daykeeper or spiritual guide. I think the pronunciation might be Aki, or you'll correct me on the pronunciation, but I'm wondering what it's taken for you to really become a vessel to bridge this Mayan wisdom into, as you call it, the concrete jungle that we're living in modern society.
An ashki. Yeah, it's been a whole process, right, of releasing the old stories, the old way of being. I mean, I was a completely different person, growing up in Riverside County, and in my 20s, another person. I mean, and every day I'm a different person. And, but throughout like the teens, then the 20s, now coming into, I'm in my mid 30s. Um, it's just been lots of changes, lots of shifts, but it had to be a lot of releasing, a lot of letting go of the past, and doing a lot of reflection and a lot of work, not just for myself and for my history, for my past and my life, but also for the generations before me, right? That generational trauma and those stories and those patterns that we can take on, those cycles. It's like breaking those cycles. Um, and really releasing, letting go of what doesn't serve me, so that I can be that vessel, so that I can be someone who is open to be a channel for that wisdom, to carry that wisdom forward in a good way. And it's such a process. It's a process, and it will always be a process. But it's a beautiful one at that. And I'm really grateful to be here, to be that one, to be another wisdom keeper, right? And we all get to be wisdom keepers. If you're listening to this, you get to be a wisdom keeper as well. And and it's a process. We get to do it together. Yeah.
And in November of 2017, you said you were, going to leave some of your life behind and head to the beautiful community of San Marcos La Laguna in Guatemala. And you wanted to strengthen your connection to your cultural heritage. You said that the cacao spirit was calling you to that land. And really, I just wanted to open the space for you to share what it was like to really feel the calling of your ancestors. I think a lot of us might suppress it or forget that we even have this indigenous blood, or in many ways, we're all mixed. We've all come from different lineages. What was that calling like for you, and what did you rediscover when you went to your land?
So what it was like for me was I was drinking ceremonial cacao, Mayan cacao from Guatemala. And there was an understanding and knowing that I was meant to connect with that medicine for my healing, for my lineage, but also I was meant to dive deeper and to share it with the world as well. Like, I knew it was meant to be shared in a good way, because everyone knows chocolate, but people didn't know about this beautiful heart medicine. And what it did to me in that first moment is like, it opened my heart, it reconnected me with the ancestors. And there was a knowing, right? And we all have different gifts and intuition, and it comes in different ways. For me, it's a knowing, a feeling. And I knew that I was meant to go to those lands and connect. So the calling was this feeling of like, you are meant to connect with your ancestors. And because you don't have living relatives from that side, you get to go to the land and just show up. And the next step will come, and the next step, right, you will take. And so I go there. I go to Guatemala. I don't know anyone. I have no family to connect with. So I'm there to just simply connect with the land, connect with the trees, connect with the ancestors. And it was absolutely incredible. I remember one moment in particular where I was in a shala and I was looking over the waters, and this was like a yoga shala. I'm looking over this beautiful lake, Lake Atilan, like you mentioned, which is actually called Lake Nashal in Mayan. And it was so beautiful. It's shimmering, and I see this beautiful blackbird flying over the sky and over the waters. And my father's nickname is Crow. So instantly when I see the black bird, I'm like, thank you. I know it's the ancestors speaking to me. Like, we see you, we love you. And I could feel them with me. And I felt this overwhelming sense of love and also grief. And, it's so interesting because at that time I wasn't able to fully be with my emotions and like feel my feelings and cry in that moment. I felt like I wanted to cry so bad, but I remember being surrounded by people I didn't know. And at the time I was like, I don't feel comfortable crying in front of strangers. And I didn't even think that, it was just a feeling that I had. Right. And it's so beautiful to see how like those moments are so, so special. And then we can go around the cycle and the spiral, and these moments can come up. And just recently, it was maybe a couple weeks ago, I was getting a massage. And the song that I was listening to when I saw the bird flying overhead was this beautiful song by Sam Garrett. And it came on while I was getting this massage in the back of my shoulder, where I hold a lot of stories, a lot of things from my past. I'll have memories come back when I'm getting body work in that particular part. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. One moment. But okay,
Breaking the cycle right now.
we're gonna just. Oh, there he goes. Okay, exactly. Got stuck. So, anyways, it came through that memory, and then I just started crying for all the moments that I had to hold my tears back. And for that particular moment, it was this healing, beautiful experience, and I felt my ancestors in that moment as well. So it can come up in so many ways and look so different for so many people and how we can connect with the ancestors. But the plants are a really beautiful way for us to connect and feel our ancestors. They're here, they have an intelligence and they're here to support us in remembering. But going to the lands is a really beautiful way. And yes, like you mentioned, I'm such a mix. And so going to different parts of the Americas is really potent for me in particular, especially going to Mexico. When I was in Oaxaca, I had incredible experiences there, right? And going to Guatemala. So I recommend people to go to the lands of their ancestors, or at least connect with the plants of their ancestors to work on reconnecting and seeing what your ancestral plants are for healing. Yeah.
And it's really interesting you brought up the plants, because for me as well, I've had a reconnection through cacao, especially. And that has been a medicine that I've been using for about 1.5 years now. And I've almost felt that it's activated something within me. And I'm curious to know, when you started reconnecting with cacao, and how does that actually activate our own DNA, our own remembrances from our past? What really came up for you in those moments? Because you also mentioned that when you were looking toward this magical lake, you saw the spirit guide, the animal spirit of your father, which I know there was a lot of painful emotions attached in your story around him. Mm-hmm. How are you becoming that cycle breaker, and how did the plants aid you in that process?
Ooh, so I mean, the cacao is heart medicine, right? So it helped to mend my heart, to open my heart again, to heal my heart, to reconnect with my inner child, especially. There are so many beautiful healing properties within cacao that supports us on a physical level, right? And we could talk about those later if you'd like. But on a deeper level, right, the cacao has been used for thousands of years by the Maya, the Mexica before them, the Toltecas before them, the Olmecas, which is the mother civilization, for healing purposes, for everything between life and death, and also for reconciliation, for families coming back together, for mending. So it's that type of medicine that helps us to reconnect. And it's interesting, people who sit in ceremonies in cacao, it comes up often that they are reconnected with their ancestors, whether their ancestors are from Mesoamerica or not, right? It doesn't matter where they will be. It supports you in remembering parts of yourself. So it's like, you open your heart like this, like a flower, and it buds open, and then it reminds you of who you truly are, which is connected to your ancestors, right? As well as so much more. But it begins there. That's like, you follow that thread and you realize, okay, I'm connected to these beautiful, wise and well ancestors, medicine people within the lineage, healed, beautiful humans. And you continue to trace those roots back. You realize that we're all connected. You realize you're connected to source as well, and you have the divine within you. And so that support, that knowing is very healing as well.
There's a word that we use often in Western society, Western culture, which is that of disability. And we usually, take people that we believe have a disability or a defect, and we sort of outcast them or put them in certain groups in society. But as you tell, in Indigenous cultures, they see those people as the healers, the curanderas, the seers, the psychics, the shamans. And in 2020, you were about to jump on a podcast just like this one. And all of a sudden you start hearing a ringing in your ear, an intense ringing in your ear that has not gone away since then. This is a thing that they call in science, in the scientific medical community, tinnitus. So how did discovering this, what Western society would call a disability, turn into a gift or a calling that you're now leveraging in your daily life to be that healer, that psychic, that seer, with the people around you?
Yeah, I go into this in depth in the book for sure because it's such a thing. Um, it's been a process, right? In the beginning, it was really incredibly challenging, and then I realized also, like I mentioned in the book, is that this is a gift, and many of us who are healers, who are medicine people, we tend to have these different types of disabilities, or what our society would consider disabilities. But what it has done is it supported me in coming into my feelings, coming into my knowing, right? Those intuitive gifts. So for someone else, they may lose their vision, and their sense of hearing may come to play a bigger role, right? And support them in hearing, different things, being able to channel, and really what it comes down to is a knowing. For me, it's a knowing, it's a feeling, it supports me in those gifts in particular. Yeah.
What came online for you on the other side of sort of having a different style of hearing than most people?
Well, the tinnitus is in my right ear, so I can't hear specifically. If you're whispering in that side, I'm not gonna be able to hear you. If it's very loud, um, loud music, I can't stick around for it. It really bothers. It's really intense, and it's constantly ringing all the time. It's still ringing till today. And I also, trust that if it's meant to go away, it will go away. And that's a possibility as well. But, I feel like I hear very clearly on my left ear. So that's beautiful. And that's a gift as well. Like I love music. I love hearing. It's a wonderful thing. So yeah, hearing more clearly on the left side. And again, hearing more deeply in different ways, right? Instead of hearing with the ear, you can hear with your heart. You can feel more with your heart, feel more with your body, and know things as well. So yeah, when you lose another sense, another one will come online to support you in another way.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we talk about ancestors, we're usually referring to people that came before us and are now passed on to the other side. And there's no way for us to physically make contact in this third dimensional reality. But, you have a chapter in your book that's you're always guided. And I'd really love if you could walk us through that process of remembering that we still have those connections, the tapestry that connects us to these loved ones, maybe people that we didn't even meet in our past that are still from the same bloodline. How do we reconnect, and what are some signs for us to be able to, know that we're guided by these powerful healers and also people that went through a lot of hardship that came before us?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. A lot of hardship that have come before us. So recently, I found out that my grandmother from my father's side was from Chiapas, Mexico, and she was raised by her grandmother. She was abandoned by her parents. And her grandmother was incredibly superstitious and would hang her from the rafters and beat the devil out of her. Um, and what I know is that my grandmother was incredible woman. She was so heart centered. She loved her children, and she was incredibly resilient. So I had no idea about her past. I only knew that she was a really loving woman, and she died before I could meet her. Um, and so it's fascinating to know that, and to realize how incredibly resilient she truly was, and then to realize how that comes down the line. And I know where I get my huge heart from. I know where I get my resiliency from, right? By realizing that story. And I like to tell people, like, regardless of whether we know it or not, we're in communication with our ancestors. We are connected to our ancestors, and we will carry forward their legacy, whether we know it or not. So it's up to us to decide and make the choice. Do we want to carry forward a legacy of their love, their resilience, their wisdom, their magic? Or do we want to carry forward, their legacy of their traumas and their, cycles and things? So it's up to us to make that choice. The ways in which we can, again, connect with the ancestors include our intention. And I suggested the plants as well, but you can create an altar. That's a really simple way of like coming to a place and meditating and calling them in at an altar space. And that can look really simple as simply having like a cloth and a candle and, lighting your candle and making that intention to call in your well and healed ancestors, your unconditionally loving ancestors, and being really specific about that, right? Because we have ancestors of all kinds. And I know there are some of us who have perhaps relatives that we don't want to connect with, or there are parts of us that of ourselves that we get to continue to heal with and work on. And so we may not want to connect with all of our relatives, and that's okay, right? So it's up to you on which relatives you'd like to be in communication with and have and cultivate that relationship with.
Are there any common signs that come up for you that like, oh, this is an ancestor, this is my grandmother coming through? What does that look like in your personal life?
A couple of things. So the blackbird is one of those that comes up quite often. Actually, the blackbird came to me recently after I found some new writings from my father, and I had found out that he had actually been on a spiritual path before he passed away, and I had no idea before. This was maybe a couple months ago now. That he was into spirituality. I did not know that. He had taken his life. I know he had been depressed throughout his entire life. He had really hard life. He was even abused. He was molested as a child, and he was incredibly depressed throughout his life. I know he had attempted suicide even when he was with my mother, like after I was born. And then he got into drugs. He got into gangs. And so that made things even harder, right? But he had been in prison, and he had reached out to someone named Luis Rodriguez, who is the owner and the founder of Tia Chucha's, which is a cultural center and independent bookstore. He reached out to Luis, who's also an author of many books, and because he loved his book, he reached out. And my father was an incredible writer as well. And so Luis and him became best friends. They ended up going to Peru together. They sat in an ayahuasca ceremony. They sat in other ceremonies. And so towards the end of his life, he was really into Buddhist practices and, again, into ceremonies. So there was a lot of beauty happening for him towards the end. And it's something that I didn't know until I saw those writings. So it's very fascinating to realize that. And then also to realize that Tia Chucha's is the bookstore that I'm having my book launch party at, which is really incredible too. And I had already had—
Was that a synchronicity, or was it
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
planned?
Not planned at all. It was a synchronicity, which is wild because a year before, or 2 years before, I had put A Child of Magic, my first book, into Tia Chucha's, not knowing who owned the book at all, the bookstore at all. I just loved the center. I loved what they were doing. It was incredible. So yeah, a synchronicity. And then 2 days later, after I find those writings, and I actually called Luis and I talked to him, and he tells me more about my dad, and we make plans to see each other and connect. And I see the crow, and the crow's outside, and I'm walking my friend's dog because I'm dog sitting, and the crow's playing with us. And I'm thinking, he's probably just like looking at the dog, but he's actually like looking at me, and then he starts to play with me. So I have a hat on, and he starts to hit my hat and fly above me and then sit back down on the railing. And then I'll go and I'll say hi, and then I'll continue on. And then he would continue to follow me. So it was really, really special. And it's those little synchronicities where you realize like, oh, this is magic. This is the ancestors coming through. And so those are some of the examples of like fully knowing, right? I didn't have to see anything or hear his voice or hear an ancestor's voice, but it's this knowing, those little winks, those little special moments. So
Did you have a knowingness or a gnosis that that crow in that moment was your father?
yes, and it's fascinating because a part of me, someone walked by and they called it a raven. And I was like, oh, maybe it is a raven. But I knew within that it was a crow. It was that little moment of doubt because someone else was trying to tell me what it was. And then it's funny because I got videos of it, of the crow playing with us. And I showed it to my partner and he's like, yeah, that's definitely a crow. I was like, yeah, I know. It was for sure my dad, like, celebrating and knowing that, like, he didn't do everything perfectly and he was a very flawed individual. And at the same time, there are gifts that he passed down. And I do feel like it's like I'm carrying the torch of the spirituality side of our path and our lineage. I'm sure there were so many incredible medicine people within our lineage. And it's like that little bit of him that stayed within him was passed down to me. And now I'm carrying that forward as well. And another thing that's very fascinating is the fact that he lived and he died in Culver City. And when I moved to LA, which was in 2009 as well, same year that he passed away, but it was later in the year, I also moved to Culver City without it being planned. I got a job and it happened to be in Culver City. So it's wild, the synchronicities.
Mm. Yeah, what's coming up for me right now is, the importance of really leaving our thoughts, our words, our wisdom that we've accumulated behind in this life for the next generations, for our future children. And it must have felt so special for you to find writings from your father, and not just any type of writing, but spiritual insights, wisdom that he was really connecting to. Was there, like anything in specific that spoke to you that, reminded you of why you're on this spiritual path yourself?
Through his writings, I'm seeing that I feel like I've written this book to, yeah, continue that healing story. He didn't have all the words, he didn't have all the ways in order to get that across, and that's what it feels like. Yeah, it feels like that continuation of sharing our unique medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, because you said that, we have to feel our painful emotions in order to become the cycle breaker and the healer
Mhm.
of our life. And, it's about feeling, allowing ourselves to feel. We're in Cancer season, so the emotions are high right now for sure. And I feel it because this is my birthday month as well. So, I'm really curious to ask you, there's many other ways that we can also connect with our ancestors. For you, one of them is through dance and
Mhm.
sensuality. And what comes up there is, especially Latina women in culture have been very over sexualized in mainstream media. How you have the Sofia Vergara, you have the Shakira, like the hips don't lie. And, we might see that as like, oh, that's so sexy, like so provocative. I want some of that. But really, as the divine feminine is beginning to come back online in culture and really activate in full force, I think this essence of what is being a Latina woman and the sensuality behind that is so important right now. If you want to speak into a little bit more of that.
Yes, yes, yes. Our sensuality is so sacred. It's so beautiful. It's being fully alive. It's being connected to our senses and enjoying life and, yeah, being fully available for it, being fully present to experience life in that way. And our sexuality is also so sacred and so beautiful. It is literally how you and I are here. We are here because of sex, and it is the most natural and most beautiful thing. It is the way that we can connect to the divine, to literally feel that creative, beautiful energy that God, right, or goddess, whatever you want to call it, you can feel that through sex. And it is such a beautiful and powerful thing. And so I feel like that's why it has been weaponized, right? What does it do to women when you just see her as a sexual object rather than see her as that beautiful, life-giving, sensual, sexual creature. And you twist it and distort it, right? It takes away from the beauty of it, from the sacredness of us. It takes that away, and we become disempowered when we don't realize, our truth and who we are. So it's so essential to know that our beautiful sensual nature is natural. And that's what I realized, is that I was always a sensual person, and this was just a natural thing. I wasn't trying to be anything. I just happened to be this way. And that is natural, and that is okay. And it's not even just natural and okay. It's healthy. It's beautiful. Um and so I want people to realize that. I want women to really realize that it's so healthy to be in that space. Yeah.
Hmm. When you return to the indigenous tribes, and obviously, that's part of your code that you exchange, is that sensuality for the
Yeah.
women in those indigenous tribes. Is that energy confronting in any way, or is it something that they already know and they welcome in? What is that like, for indigenous tribes as well, bringing in that feminine energy?
So, yeah, there's resistance there. And I believe it's there because of the patriarchy that has been, has seeped into every culture, into indigenous cultures as well. And so it has been confronting for different indigenous peoples. And I remember one of my first teachers, she did not accept me for my sensuality and for me being in that sacred central place in my life. At the time, in the beginning, when I was sharing cacao, which was separate from my sharing of sensuality, but on social media they could kind of flow throughout, right? Because I'm sharing all parts of myself. And she didn't like that. She didn't like that. She didn't like that I had also shared the fact that I share so much about cacao, and I shared that cacao is also an aphrodisiac, on top of the fact that
Mm.
it's beautiful and antioxidants and vitamins and nutrients and has anandamide and all these properties. It is an aphrodisiac as well, right? As you know, it is a heart opener, and it helps you to pump your blood more efficiently. And I had mentioned that online, and she did not like that as well. And I had then gone to Costa Rica shortly after that trip, and I was really disappointed because I'm like, why is she saying that? So many other teachers have said it is an aphrodisiac, and I know it to be true for myself, right? That's my experience as well. And then I went to Costa Rica, and I was sitting with the Bribri tribe, and they've been working with cacao as well for thousands of years. And I asked the teacher there, and one of the indigenous people, she's like, absolutely, it's an aphrodisiac. Why do you think we have so many children? I thought that was
If our population is declining, hey, get out the cacao, get out the cacao.
exactly. Exactly. Because what does it make you feel? It makes you feel so good. It makes you feel so euphoric. It makes you feel so heart open and expansive. It's embodiment medicine. So you feel really deeply connected to your body and you feel great. Like, of course, it's also an aphrodisiac. So, yeah, that came up.
Mm, yeah, for sure. I feel it as well. I feel it as well. You
Yeah.
said that to become a Mayan spiritual guide, one may receive their gifts and power from the unseen realms, or
Mhm.
that the sign that they were born with. If we could go a little bit deeper into that Mayan wisdom, Mayan lineage of
Yeah.
how these cultures would receive their gifts, receive their powers through the unseen realms. Have you talked to these elders that have shared with you what it's like to traverse these realms, what they're seeing, what they're receiving, what messages are coming up? And also we can get into the sign that we were born with a little bit after.
Yeah, for one of my teachers, Donna Dominga, the way she received her gift of being the midwife and healer and curandera, and she received her gifts through her dreams. That's how she was spoken to, through ancestors, through spirit, through different ways, but it was all through the dreams. And for my other teachers, it was a calling for my Nana Lou more so, where she knew she needed to connect, and she knew she had these gifts. And then she sought it out. She sought the teachers that spoke to her, the wisdom keepers that spoke to her. And first it began for her in Mexico. And then she went to Guatemala to connect deeper with the wisdom keepers there of the Mayan lineage. And then for my other teacher, Nana Maria, who is from Totonicopan in Guatemala, who is, pure Mayan, it was a gift that was given to her through the unseen realms as well, but also through her lineage. So her father was a tata. So,
What does
it's
that mean?
different. Her father was a Mayan wisdom keeper before her. So it's part
A
of the
tata.
lineage. A tata. So you call, either the tata is the male figure, and a tata is like your father, right? It's like your spiritual father. The nana is your spiritual mother. So Nana Maria's blood father was the tata. So yeah. And I forgot your second
And they
question.
also, in the Mayan cultures, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no,
The
I forgot your
signs, the
second
signs
question.
we're
Oh, yes,
born
the
with.
signs. Yes, the signs. So yeah, depending on what day you were born with and the energy you were born with, right? It may show you that you are a medicine person or a healer, depending on what your unique sign is. So we would do your birth chart and you would find out, okay, what is my Mayan sign? What is my cross? What is the energy I'm born with? So I'll speak to mine. For me, I am a 3 Ashpu. And that represents the sun. That represents it represents the healer. It represents the human as well, but it is one of the most shamanic in the Mayan calendar. And so, what you have to go through is a lot of hardships in order to shine like the sun. So, in order to learn the wisdom, you must go through a lot of darkness, a lot of hardships in order to come out on the other side of those experiences to shine and to support others with the light. And 3 represents also hardship. So it's the most shamanic as well as the most difficult sign to have. So even my teachers and Tata Mark, who has taught me most about the calendar, has taught me that has shared with me that that's the most difficult one on the board, and he wouldn't change it. He wouldn't want that one for many people, just because 3 is more internal. There's a lot that we would have to go through. And you read the book. There is a lot that I shared there. I've been through a lot throughout my life, right? But on the other side of that is there's so much beauty and so much to be grateful for and so much magic on the other side. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all of it.
What's one of those, I guess, dark night of the soul moments that you think really activated that shamanic healer medicine that was within you, that is within you?
Well, one of the biggest ones that changed my life forever is being in uh the most toxic point of my life, which I guess you could say began actually after my father took his life. So we can start there. When my father took his life, it was a month before I had found a relative and wanted to connect with him because I wanted him in my life very badly. And I had felt like I was old enough and that we could at least be friends, that I didn't need to have him as a father figure, but at least we could be in each other's lives. And when I found that relative, that family member, they asked me not to connect with him because they were going through difficulty with them. So then finding out that he took his life a month later, it was the same month as my birthday as well, the same year. I turned 22. It was incredibly traumatic, incredibly traumatic. I remember I've lost a lot of memories throughout my 20s because of the trauma that I endured around that, and didn't have the tools and didn't have people to talk to with emotional intelligence. And so I bottled everything up, and I really turned to numbing my feelings. And then when I was in my most toxic of relationships, it was 2014, 15, that I, really decided to change my life forever. And that's when yoga supported me. That's when I was introduced to cacao. So cacao was the big catalyst to really shift me and remind me of my power, of my magic, of my connection to really beautiful things. Because before that, I honestly hadn't known anything positive about my lineage, about my, especially my father's side, right? And there was so much trauma on that side. So then to be introduced to this beautiful heart medicine that comes from my peoples was a huge catalyst for me. And then even through, writing the book was, I went through so much around that time. Right before the channel and the messages were coming through, I was being harassed incredibly through social media. I was really traumatized around that time as well. I had a miscarriage before that, and I had gone through a lot of things around that time, right? And so sometimes going through the most challenging of things, and like Ashpu has proven, right, we can go through so many challenges, but on the other side of that, there's so much beauty. And when we can learn from those experiences and realize it's like shaping us, it's making us, it's supporting us in becoming who we are, it's all just fuel for the fire of the sun.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's very symbolic as well, because I know from the Colombian tribes, the Kogis, those that are going to be initiated as sort of the head shamanic figures of the tribe, they have to spend the first years of their life in complete darkness to be able to traverse those realms. But here we're talking about a different type of darkness, more external, and there's so much that we can learn from that darkness in order to discover our light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I know that, in that toxic relationship that you mentioned, you were really positioned as the archetype of the muse. And I think that is a figure that I guess men really put a lot of women into, of like, oh, she's my muse, I'm going to create art through her, because of her, and all of this. But what does it look like when a woman reclaims that muse archetype for herself and starts becoming the muse in her own life?
And well, what it looks like is then you become the artist, right? And the creator of your life. And it's incredibly empowering to realize that you are not only the muse, but you are the artist and you are the art. And yeah, it's taking your power back. And it's also beautiful to be the muse. You can be both, and I consider myself to be both.
Hmm. Back to the Mayan wisdom real quick. I wanted to ask, because in the book you mentioned that the Mayans, they believe that they had a lot of different beliefs around, past lives, reincarnation, all of these things that, that we're souls living a human experience. But one thing that really stood out to me is that when they believe that if you live past 80 years old, you become one with the cosmos. I wanted to dig deeper a little bit into that, of what they really mean by, giving it like a specific age, that, if you reach this age, then you become connected with the cosmos. What is that? What is that about?
And different lineages will say different things. What I think that means, by my teachers, is that if you can reach that point, you have lived your life in a certain way, so that you can get to that point and that place of wisdom and being that channel for divine wisdom, cosmic wisdom, as well as earth wisdom. And that's what it means to me, right? And if you ask another Mayan or another wisdom keeper, they may have a little bit of a different definition for that.
And how do they view the soul's role in this human experience? Why are we really here?
I mean, I'll speak for me actually, because I believe we are here, and I believe that many of my ancestors believe this as well. That we are here to be emanations of love and to come back to love and to be expressions of love, and to be, again, like the tree, is to be the most beautiful expression living on earth, the most beautiful embodiment of what it means to live life in a good way here on earth. And that is to be, again, rooted rooted and interconnected to the ecosystems all around. Like the tree is connected to the mycelium and the roots beneath the ground. And in that place of giving and receiving and reciprocity and gratitude, and that keeps them healthy and happy and in harmony. And they're receiving nutrients and they're giving and they're, in that beautiful, loving expression. And from there, they're able to be in their strength and resilience and strong and growing and glowing and rising up into the heavens and able to be that unique expression and divine emanation of love.
Mm. In my journey, we started this podcast with a short prayer that I spoke in Spanish, and it's something I had never tried or done before. It felt very special, especially with you, who was also reconnecting people back into their, ancestral roots. For me, it's been a journey because, I left Colombia when I was very little, grew up in the US, and then came back to Colombia at 16, finished high school there, and then went off to Spain. So we know from history, history is often written by the winners, but I love to just touch upon and expose really the true history of the Mesoamerican people, what really happened during the colonialization period, and how we can make amends with what happened in order to fulfill what has been called the condor, what is it, the eagle and condor prophecy. Yeah, reconnecting, those two lands of South America, Central America, and the European countries.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to the ancient Mesoamericans, and their beautiful culture. There's so much beauty in it. There's so much wisdom in it. Our ancestors were incredible inventors. They were mathematicians, astrologers. They created the corn. They created the first democracy, first ever democracy, right? They created the first the school systems. They created the calculator, right? They had calendars, agriculture. They had the Three Sisters, which is honestly the most beautiful. I think you may have already gotten to that part of reading about the Three Sisters and that beautiful trilogy of coming together, and how when you work together, you end up having the most beautiful things, right? The Three Sisters is the corn, maize, the squash, and beans. And the way that it grows, it supports the soil so that they all grow plentiful and really healthy. They protect the big leaves, protect the beans. The beans grow up the vine and the corn, so it grows abundantly. It's this beautiful ecosystem, and the Mayans came up with that. Or the peoples of the Mesoamericas came up with that. So, they were spiritual people. They really they saw all things as living. They saw spirit in all things. They were biophilic, which meant that they promoted and encouraged life. They never invented things to take life. Their weapons were from prehistoric times. So, they were life-giving, and they had beautiful social organizations called calpulis. And those were people who came together to support the communities. They would, educate the people. They would come together for gatherings, for ceremony. They would also help the sick. And they really cared about community. And they also saw the beauty of diversity in unity and unity in diversity. So it was beautiful to learn these things about our ancient culture, because much of that has not been taught in our schools. I know that I didn't know anything about ancient Mesoamerica and any of the positive things. They called, our people usually savage, right? Which is fascinating because that's supposed to be like a derogatory word, a bad word, meaning that they're very violent people. But actually that root of that word actually means to be of the woods. It's a Latin word. So how beautiful to realize that simply means that you were connected to the nature, to earth, right? To the woods, to the trees. And that's what they were like. They had beautiful cities. They were incredibly hygienic. I know when the Spanish had come, they couldn't believe how clean it was. They said they could eat off of the floor. It was like beautiful and just an incredible cities, beautiful cities that we had there. So there's so much wisdom that we can learn. And also just knowing that, we had warriors within our lineage because we had to. And at the same time, we had our beautiful wisdom keepers and our healers and our medicine people. And so when we know that, we have all of it, and there's stuff to heal as well. And generational pain and trauma that's passed down, but there's also the gifts, and there's also the beauty and the wisdom that we can activate when we're intentional with our lives, when we make that a point, and make that choice for ourselves.
And as you mentioned again, Spanish is a colonialized language. Of course, we're saying Spanish, it comes from the land of Spain, of course. And our, ancient and Mesoamerican cultures had their own sacred languages that you've actually done the work to learn some of them and their actual meanings. And for someone that really wants to reconnect with those ancient words or phrases or meanings of what they were really transmitting through the frequency of language, what are some words that you would really leave for us and the meaning behind them that just goes really deep into the roots of these lands where you and I both come from?
Yeah, words hold such a frequency. And so it's so beautiful to have our English and our Spanish so that we can communicate with so many people. And at the same time, it's really essential to realize those aren't our Indigenous languages. And we get to learn Indigenous words, native words, from our peoples. So I do have an oracle deck that's coming out in 2025 where you will be able to see the Mayan calendar there, and that will give you many words, right? You have the 20 Nahuales, which are all in the Mayan language, and the 13 numbers. So that's a very easy way, but I will leave you with Ojrahil Matioshil, and that means 13 thank yous, and Matiosh. So Matiosh means thank you, and this is deep gratitude, not a simple thank you, but it's a deeply felt gratitude. It's very simple. Matiosh, Matiosh, Matiosh. That's an easy one that you can take with you. You can implement that, into ceremonies when you really want to feel that deep gratitude, which supports us in receiving more things to be grateful for, and living in a beautiful vibration of love is feeling gratitude. So yeah, I want people to know that word. The Ojrahil Matioshil, 13 thank yous, is so beautiful. It's a little bit harder to say, but that's a beautiful one because it incorporates all things. So even if we don't remember the names to all things, we can say thank you for reminding us of our wholeness and our oneness in that word. Those two words, Ojlehil Matioshi. So yeah, Matiosh. Matiosh, thank you.
What's the importance of 13?
13 represents completion and wholeness.
Mm-hmm. In the Mayan calendar?
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. Christine, we end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are just final questions. The first two are personalized to the guest, and the last one we ask at the end of every show. So I wanted just to ask you before that, where can people connect with you? Where can they get this beautiful, I recommend going really deep into this book because there's a lot in there. There's a lot of teachings that connect us with those ancestral wisdom teachings that you've been passed down through your elders, through the journeys you've taken in Guatemala, around, South America, Central America. Where can they connect with you further? And also, where would you send them to get their own copy of this book?
Yeah. You can go to my website or my Instagram. So website's I am Christine Olivia. Christine Olivia, ChristineOlivia. And my Instagram's just Christine Olivia _. You can find it all.
We'll link that.
On either one. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We'll link that in the show notes. And for the final trio, the first one that I had for you is what is one of the major cycles that you have broken from your lineage to heal the future generations to come?
I would say continuing being abusive, really. I mean, that's really pretty intense to say, but abuse, right? Living a life in love, choosing to live in love, to live compassionately, kindly. Yeah, and even in this, in big and in small ways. Yeah.
That's powerful. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Second one is, what is the greatest strength and greatest weakness that you have inherited from your ancestors?
My greatest strength is definitely my resiliency. And that's a great question because we know, right? I went into that with my grandmothers, but both grandmothers, right? And then the grandmothers before them, like that resiliency comes from, I feel like, the women and from the men in my line. My greatest weakness, I'm going to leave you with a little one. I guess it would be, I was going to say, oh no, I have one. Okay. Worry would be one of them. Yeah. Worry. My grandmother was a warrior from my
Mm.
mother's side. So that would be the weakness would be the worrying.
Is warrior, is that word connected to worry?
You know what? I know I was feeling that when I was
I was
saying
like,
it because it
whoa.
sounded like I was saying warrior, but I was saying worrier. But exactly, like there was the warriors within my lineage and the warrior, and I feel like they're linked, but I don't know that for sure. Right?
Well, a warrior, and that's one of the guiding principles of this podcast, is courage. And you quote Terence McKenna in your book, and his quote of nature loves courage. I just wanted to leave people with this quote before we get into the final question is, you said that magic is done by hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it is a feather bed. If you have any thoughts on that quote, what came through when you were writing that?
Just take the leap. Take the leap and you will be supported. Like all will be well. Know that for me, it's knowing that I was guided, knowing that I belong to so much more than just what I've seen. But also knowing that I belong to my ancestors, which include the beautiful magical elementals as well. And so all will be well, and I am guided, protected, and so are you. We all are.
Powerful. The last question we ask at the end is called the time capsule question. This is a question that encourages us to travel out around 15 to 20 years out into the future. I chose out these time frames because I feel that is going to be a time when the young generations of today are going to be stepping more into leadership positions around the world. You know, the next healers, the next political leaders, the next, I guess, people that are pushing this new earth forward, this new frequency, this new consciousness that's emerging on the planet right now. And they're going to need a lot of guidance from wisdom keepers, ancestors that came before us. And you had the opportunity to leave behind a time capsule for these leaders that they will open in 20 years down the line. And then as they open this time capsule, you can leave anything in there. It doesn't have to be something physical. It could be a teaching, a food, whatever comes to mind that you would like to include for these leaders that will then help them pioneer into the next phase of humanity, the next stage of consciousness that is arising on the planet right now. What would you leave inside of this time capsule?
I can leave multiple things, right?
All that you want. We can spend the next hour just putting things in the time capsule.
I'm like, oh my God, I would leave them so many things. I would want them to connect with their inner child so deeply, so then I would want to leave them with my books, right? I mean, I have 8 children's books as well. So, but I would leave them with at least one of my books. I would love to leave them with, Cacao, so that they could connect with that embodiment medicine to remember who they are. And also a dance, like May they drink the cacao, read an excerpt, and go and dance and really be the embodiment of gratitude so that they can live their life in a beautiful way.
And I think the question I'm feeling from the collective that everyone wants to know is, how do you prepare your cacao?
Well, so many different ways. But if you buy ceremonial cacao, you can get Somalux on my website as well, which would give you like a block or chopped. And so you would just add that to hot water. You could put it in a blender, use 2 tablespoons to have a ceremonial dose, add some cinnamon, other spices you may like. I like to add a little ginger, sometimes nutmeg, a natural sweetener. You could do monk fruit if you're not having a lot of sugar. You could do coconut sugar. And I like to add a little bit of coconut to help with the froth, which is just also delicious. But that's a simple and easy way, and it's delicious. And then you get to feel all of those health benefits. Make sure not to boil your cacao for really long on the stove, because then you'll kill the healing, beautiful health benefits and properties that are within it.
No boiling in the water.
So you don't want to boil the water with the cacao in it. So maybe you boil your water first, right? And you put that into the blender with the cacao. I like to always do it below boiling. But if you're like, let's say you're making it on stovetop, you don't have a blender, you're getting the water hot with the cacao and you're mixing it with a mixer, just don't boil it too long. You don't want to boil it because then it just kills all of those living enzymes in the fat, where the fat has all that beautiful enzymes and the healing properties.
Beautiful. Well, Christine, we have homework for people. Go and make your cacao. Let us know when you made it, how delicious it was. If you need any tips, just comment below. We'll help you get your cacao situation sorted. But, before we end off, I just wanted to thank you from the heart, Maltyox. We actually met in LA about, a month ago. And, I came on that trip. I had a few, projects that I was going to do out there, but the rest, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't know who I was going to connect with. I didn't know. I was in, as you would call it, the great mystery of life, the great unknown, the void. And it's so magical how we realize that through our vibration, through the energy that we emit, we bring in people, we call in people that are teachers that can also, in many ways, complement that energy. And I feel very at home when we had our conversations, our Air One runs down in Venice Beach, and just, thanking you so much from the heart for the work that you're doing and really being a voice to our community of brown people, of Latin Americans, and really helping us remember our story, because I feel that when we remember where we came from, who we are, and where we're headed, then we truly tap into the great mystery of life. So appreciate you with my whole heart. And I appreciated this conversation so much.
I appreciate you so deeply. Thank you for everything that you do, for your light, your magic. Oh, you're so loved and appreciated. Thank you.
Much love.